The night my cousin got married, I sat at a table full of strangers and realized I had never felt more alone in my entire life. That sounds dramatic. I know it does. But there's something uniquely cruel about attending a wedding when your own relationship has just quietly, unceremoniously dissolved. Not with a fight, not with slammed doors or tearful confessions, but with a text message on a Tuesday afternoon that said, "I don't think this is working anymore," and a read receipt that arrived 11 minutes later. 4 years, 11 minutes. So there I was at the Fairmont in Vancouver, in a dress I'd bought with him in mind, sitting at table 9, the overflow table, the one tucked near the corridor to the kitchen where the servers kept bumping my chair. Drinking a glass of Pinot Gris. I didn't particularly want, and watching my cousin Jess dance with her new husband, like the rest of us, didn't exist. Which was fine. That's how it should be. I just wished I'd had the sense to RSVP with a +1 I actually had. My mum kept shooting me looks from across the room, the kind that said, "Are you okay? And please don't cry," simultaneously. I mouthed "I'm fine" at her and turned back toward the window, toward the lights of the harbor. October in Vancouver does something to the water at night. It goes black and silver, and the North Shore mountains disappear into cloud, and the whole city looks like something built to be admired from a distance. I was good at distances. "You're hiding." I turned. I hadn't heard anyone approach, which was strange because the man standing beside me was not a small presence. He was tall in the way that makes a room feel slightly reorganized. Not threatening, just significant. Dark jacket, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been through something and come out less soft for it, but not unkind. Late 30s, maybe. Salt just beginning at his temples. "I'm not hiding," I said. "I'm enjoying the view." "You've been staring at the parking structure for the last 10 minutes. I glanced out the window. He was right. The harbor was to the left. I'd been looking at concrete. "I'm enjoying the parking structure," I said. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the precondition for one. He pulled out the empty chair beside me. There were 3 empty chairs at my table, which should tell you everything about where I ranked in the seating hierarchy, and sat down without asking. I should have minded. I didn't. "Bride or groom?" he asked. "Bride. She's my cousin. You?" "Business associate of the groom." He said it like that explained something and nothing at all. "I almost didn't come. Why did you?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I thought it would be good for me to be around people." I understood that in a way I couldn't have explained to anyone at that table, or probably anyone at that wedding. The specific loneliness of choosing to be in a crowd, because the alternative is an apartment that still has someone else's coffee mug on the shelf. "I'm Marguerite," I said. "Everyone calls me Maggie." "Nathaniel," he said. "No one calls me Nate. Does anyone try? Once. What happened to them?" This time it was a smile. Small, like he was rationing it. "They work in Calgary now." I laughed. A real one, the kind that surprised me. I hadn't done that in a while. The band started something slow and couples drifted toward the floor in that inevitable gravitational way, and I watched them and tried not to think about how Marcus, my ex, though that word still felt like wearing someone else's shoes, had never once asked me to dance at anything, not once in 4 years. I'd told myself I didn't mind. You tell yourself a lot of things when you're trying to make something work. "You look like someone just walked across your grave," Nathaniel said. Charming expression. My grandmother used it. "I was just thinking about my ex," I said. Because the wine was doing something to my honesty filter, and anyway, what did it matter? "He's not here. He's never been anywhere, really." That was sort of the problem. Nathaniel didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "what happened," or any of the things people say when they're filling silence rather than sitting in it. He just nodded slowly, like he was filing it somewhere. I appreciated that more than I could say. "Mine left 3 years ago," he said eventually. "Took the dog. That's brutal." She was right too. I was working 80-hour weeks and I kept rescheduling things, and one day she just stopped waiting. He picked up a water glass, turned it in his hand. The dog was named Biscuit, golden retriever. I still look for her when I come home sometimes. Biscuit. This composed, serious man had a golden retriever named Biscuit. "I'm sorry," I said. 3 years ago, he repeated, like that was supposed to make it smaller. It didn't. The night moved the way wedding receptions do, in waves, loud then soft. The speeches that go too long. The aunties who've had one too many glasses of Riesling. The moment the lights dim for the first dance, and the whole room holds something back. I watched my cousin Jess put her head on her husband's shoulder and felt something in my chest do a complicated thing. Not jealousy. Not quite. More like longing in a direction I couldn't name. Nathaniel was still there. We'd stopped explaining ourselves and started just talking, which is rarer than it sounds. He asked what I did, and I told him I was a physiotherapist with a clinic in Kitsilano, and he actually asked follow-up questions. Real ones, not polite conversation ones. What drew you to it? What's the hardest part? I asked what he did, and he said he ran a private equity firm, which should have been the most boring sentence in the English language, but the way he talked about it. The companies, the people, the decisions that kept him up at night, made it something else entirely. You actually care, I said at one point, like it surprised me. About what? The businesses, the people running them. You're not just talking about money. He looked at me for a moment. Most people don't notice that. Most people aren't paying attention. The reception was winding down. The older guests were leaving in slow procession, clutching wedding favors. Little jars of local honey from a farm on the Sunshine Coast. Jess had been very proud of those, and the dance floor had been surrendered to the 20-somethings who were going to carry this thing through until last call. My mum appeared at my elbow. Maggie, sweetheart, your father and I are heading out. Will you be all right getting home? I drove, Mum. You've been drinking. 2 glasses over 4 hours. I'm fine. She looked at Nathaniel with the specific calibrated curiosity of a mother who has been worrying about her daughter's romantic life for the better part of a year. I watched her take him in. The suit, the bearing, the way he'd stood up slightly when she approached. And I could see the arithmetic happening behind her eyes. Nathaniel, he said, and shook her hand. Your daughter has been very good company tonight. My mum beamed. Traitor. After she left, I turned back to him. She's going to tell my aunt. Who's going to tell Jess? This is going to be a whole thing. Is it? You've met one mother? You've met them all. I wouldn't know, he said. Mine passed when I was 19. The way he said it was matter of fact, which I knew by now meant it was anything but. I didn't rush to fill that space. I let it be what it was. I'm sorry, I said quietly. She would have liked weddings, he said. She would have cried at the vows and danced too long and eaten all the little desserts off the tray. A beat. I ate all the little desserts off the tray tonight, in her honor. I felt something crack open in my chest in the most unexpected way. The venue staff were starting to clear the outer tables. A woman with a headset gave our section a pointed look. I should get my coat, I said. Let me walk you to your car. The parkade was 2 levels down, accessible through a side door that let out into that specific variety of Vancouver October cold. Not brutal, just insistent, the kind that finds the gaps in your jacket. The city made its nighttime sounds around us. A Ciabus horn somewhere on the inlet, rain beginning on concrete, a cab idling at the hotel entrance. My car was a 10-year-old Subaru with a physiotherapy conference, lanyard still hanging from the rear view, and a reusable grocery bag from Choices in the back seat. I was suddenly aware of it in a way I hadn't been in years. He noticed me noticing. Nice car. Please, I mean it. I drive a Tesla. Everyone in my world drives a Tesla. It's like a uniform. He looked genuinely tired of it. What year is this? 2014. Does it start reliably? Mostly. Mostly, he repeated, and something in his voice was so genuinely delighted by mostly that I had to look away. I unlocked the door, stood with my hand on the handle and the night pressing in around us. This was, I started. Expected, he said. I was going to say nice. Nice is a word people use when they mean something more and don't want to commit to it. He wasn't wrong. I was quiet for a moment. I haven't talked to someone like that in a long time, I said. Talked, like, actually talked. Neither have I. The rain was getting more serious. It caught the light from the parking structure ceiling and made the air look gauzy and soft. I don't know why I'm telling you this, I said. I'm not usually. I don't just tell people things. Neither do I, he said. And yet, I looked at him. He looked back. There was something so careful about him, and I don't mean careful like guarded. I mean careful like someone who has learned to notice what they're doing before they do it. Like someone who's been burned and learned and didn't let the burning make him cruel. "Can I call you?" he asked. "At some point." No pressure. This was the best conversation I've had in months and I'd like to not lose it. I gave him my number. He put it into his phone with the same focus he probably gave everything, and then he held the door open while I got in, and he waited until I'd pulled out of the spot before he turned and walked back toward the hotel. I sat in the Subaru in the parkade for a minute before I drove anywhere. Just sat. The honey jar from the wedding favor was on the passenger seat. I didn't remember picking it up. He texted the next morning. 8:47 a.m., which felt deliberate. Not too eager, not calculated casual either. Just, "It's Nathaniel. Good morning." I was between clients, standing at the front desk of the clinic, with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand, and I read it 3 times before I replied. He called that Thursday. We talked for an hour and 20 minutes. I know because I missed a grocery delivery window and had to reschedule. And my roommate, Petra. I should say former roommate, she'd moved out in August, but I still talked about her in present tense out of habit, would have had a lot to say about that. He was in Toronto the following week for work, and we texted in the spaces between his meetings, which he described with a dry exhaustion that made me laugh while I was waiting for the kettle to boil. I learned things. He'd grown up in Ottawa, in a house near the Rideau Canal that flooded every spring. He had a younger brother he spoke to every Sunday. He gave a portion of every deal to a scholarship fund his mother had started before she died, and he never mentioned it like it was something to be admired. I found out almost by accident, when he mentioned the admin of it in passing. I told him about Marcus eventually. Not all of it, but enough. The 4 years, the slow erosion of expectation, the Tuesday text. He listened without performing sympathy. "Did you love him?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. I thought I did. I think I loved the idea of it more than I loved him. Which is a terrible thing to realize. Not terrible. Just honest. When did you get so reasonable? 41 years of trial and a lot of error, he said. He was in Vancouver for 2 days in November for a board meeting, and he asked if I wanted to get dinner. I said yes in the time it takes to send a text, which should tell you something about where my head was. We went to a place in Yaletown, small, wood-beamed, the kind that doesn't have its menu on a screen outside. And I wore the same dress I'd worn to the wedding, because it was the only nice thing I owned that wasn't specifically a work thing. And when I walked in, he was already there, standing near the bar, and when he saw me, his expression did something that I felt in my collarbone. Dinner was 3 hours. I ate everything. I talked with my hands, which I do when I'm comfortable with someone, and which my mum has been trying to get me to stop since I was 7. He ordered wine, without making it a production, and asked the server actual questions about the menu, and at one point the chef came out to say hello, because apparently they knew each other, and the whole thing was so naturally warm and completely without performance that I revised something about what I'd assumed private equity men were like. "You're not what I expected," I told him, walking along the seawall after. Rain had held off. The city was doing its nighttime thing. "What did you expect?" "More, I don't know. Edges." He considered that. "I have edges. Where are they?" He was quiet for long enough that I thought he might not answer. Then, "I don't trust easily. I move slower than most people want me to. I work too much still, even knowing what it cost me. I don't. I keep people at a very specific distance, and I'm not always aware I'm doing it until someone points it out." He glanced over. "Is that enough edges? That's quite a lot, actually," you asked. I did. We walked. The water was dark and moving, and the mountains were invisible again, clouds low across the north shore. I could see the lights of the Seabus crossing. "I'm not good at this," I said, because it seemed fair to match his honesty with mine. Relationships, letting people in. I have this habit of adjusting myself to fit what someone else needs, and then being confused when it doesn't work. My therapist calls it anxious accommodation. I call it trying too hard and saying it's fine when it isn't. Does it help? Calling it something? Sometimes. Sometimes you just do the thing anyway and name it after. He stopped walking. I stopped with him. "I'd like to keep seeing you," he said. "I want to be straightforward about that because I don't play games well. I don't have the patience for it anymore. Neither do I. Okay, he said. Like that was enough. Like okay could hold everything it needed to. I suppose it did. December arrived the way it does in Vancouver. Not with snow, mostly, but with a particular quality of gray and the smell of wet cedar and the Christmas lights that go up in the West End and make everything look like a film set. My clinic got busy with the seasonal rush of people who'd overdone the skiing at Whistler, and Nathaniel had a stretch of travel that took him to Calgary, and then Montreal, and then briefly to London. And we talked in the time zones in between. I met his brother once in late December, briefly, over video call, when Nathaniel and I were having dinner at his condo in Cole Harbour. His brother was exactly like him in bearing. Nothing like him in personality. Loud, quick to laugh, the kind of man who makes friends at gas stations. He winked at me through the screen and mouthed finally at Nathaniel when he thought I wasn't looking. I absolutely was looking. I told my cousin Jess about Nathaniel in January, over coffee in her new apartment in Mount Pleasant. I hadn't meant to lead with it, but she asked how I was and I said fine, and she gave me the look she's been giving me since we were 12. That means I know you're lying. Please try again. His name is Nathaniel, I said. She put down her cup. Full name, not a nickname. He doesn't do nicknames. God, how is he in person? I thought about it. Steady, I said. He's very steady. Like I can feel how present he is. You know how some people are somewhere else in their head even when they're sitting right in front of you? He's not like that. Jess looked at me for a moment. You're not describing someone you've been on a few dates with. I looked out her window at the January rain. No, I said. I suppose I'm not. Here is what I know about grief and the gaps it leaves. They don't close. They become part of the shape of you. Nathaniel knew this differently than I did, having lost his mother young, having lost his marriage in the quiet, grinding way that is somehow worse than the dramatic kind. He didn't pretend the gaps weren't there. He built things around them, carefully. There was an evening in February, ordinary in every external way, a weeknight. We were at my apartment, which still had a shelf of books that used to be half Marcus's, and now were entirely mine by default. Nathaniel was at the kitchen table going through something on his laptop, and I was on the couch with a file I was supposed to be reviewing, and neither of us was talking, and at some point I looked up and realized I was completely at ease. Not happy in a performing way. Not trying. Just at rest. He must have felt me looking because he looked back. What? He said. Nothing, I said. Nothing. He gazed for a moment, then he went back to his screen. But he reached over and put his hand on my ankle as he did. That was February. By March, I had started to understand something about what it means to choose someone versus fall into them. Marcus had been a fall. Comfortable. Low effort in the way that is only comfortable until it isn't. Nathaniel was a choice I made every morning, not because it was hard, but because it was real. Because I could see him clearly. The edges he'd told me about. The work habit he was still dismantling. The grief he carried like a stone in his pocket. And I chose all of it, eyes open. He called me one evening from Montreal. Late, his time. He was walking back to his hotel from a dinner that had run long. I want to ask you something, he said. And I want you to take it seriously. Okay. I've been thinking about what I want the next chapter of my life to look like. Not the work part. The other part. A pause. I could hear the city behind him, a different city. And I keep coming back to you. You're the thing I'm building toward, Maggie. Whether or not I've been clear about that. I sat down on the edge of my bed. I'm not proposing anything specific. I just want to know if we're going in the same direction. I thought about Table 9 at the Fairmont, the parking structure I'd been staring at. The way he sat down without asking, and somehow that had been exactly right. Yes, I said. We're going in the same direction. He breathed out slowly, like he'd been holding that for a while. Okay, he said. There it was again. That word that somehow carried everything. It was April when he gave me a key to his place in Cole Harbour. Not as an announcement, not with a speech. He put it on the counter when I was making tea one Saturday morning, and when I looked up, questioningly, he was already looking back at the newspaper. In case you're ever here when I'm not, he said. Like it was practical. Like it wasn't the most tender thing I'd been handed in years. I picked up the key. It was warm from his pocket. I closed my fingers around it. The North Shore Mountains were clear that morning, the way they get in April when the clouds finally lift. Sharp and white-topped and enormous. The kind of view that makes you remember the actual scale of the world. Nathaniel's windows faced them directly. He'd probably stopped seeing them years ago, the way you stop seeing anything that's always been there. "Look," I said, nodding toward the window. He looked up from the paper, looked at the mountains for a moment, then at me. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I see it." And I knew he wasn't only talking about the view.